salutare e ringraziare Paolo Garonna per aver organizzato questo incontro e di avermi invitato. Io non ho altri meriti per essere qui che l'amicizia con Paolo Garonna e la lunga collaborazione nella Fondazione Centesimus Annus pro Pontifice. E mi dispiace non essere a Roma, ma anyway, to discuss economic recovery, I think Alfredo Pastor is calling me now, but it's okay, no?
Yes, we have solved the issue.
Okay, so
maybe Mr. Sugranyes, before you start, just technically speaking, so that everybody is aware. So please, everybody who joined us, if you can kindly shut off your microphones so that there's no background noise. And also advise you that the recording of the session will be starting now, so you can always watch the recording online on our website after the meeting in case you couldn't have enough of us, and also that you can always post any questions on the chat box. You see the icon above. And now I give back the floor to Mr. Sugranyes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Farris. Well, to discuss economic recovery in Spain post-COVID, well, that's future thinking or wishful thinking, because we are in the middle of it. But we here have today three personalities who are among the best qualified and the most competent to do so. At least I don't know any other one who could do better. We have Professor Herrero, Carmen Herrero, who is Professor Emeritus of Economic Analysis at the University of Alicante, PhD in Mathematical Science at the University of Valencia, National Jaime I Economy Award in 2017, and her themes of research include fairness questions, health economics, education, distribution indicators. Then we have Alfredo Pastor, whom I can't see, but I think he's on the line. Professor Emeritus of Economy at the reputed IESE Business School in Barcelona, PhD in Economics from Barcelona and MIT. His main interests are European Union and economic policies. He held important positions in public service in the 90s. He was chair of Instituto Nacional de Industria, the group of industrial state-owned holdings, and Secretary of State for the Economy. He writes a prestigious column fortnightly in the Barcelona most respected newspaper, La Vanguardia. And José Manuel González Páramo, who is a member of the Academy of Political and Science and well-known expert in monetary and banking questions, PhD from Madrid University and Columbia. He was a member of the Executive Committee of the European Central Bank from 2004 to 2012, and later an executive board member at BBVA Group in charge of global economics, regulation, and public affairs. So that's a very diverse points of view, also diverse geographical situations in Spain, Alicante, Barcelona, and Madrid, although I think José Manuel is more from, his heart is in Galicia, which is extreme northwest. They will talk, each of them from their different point of view. First, we'll touch on finance, then national policies, and finally, social and education. And we have very knowledgeable persons among the participants today who will certainly wish to contribute comments and queries in the Q&A questions afterward. As regards the second part of today's session subject, Spanish-Italian Financial Services Dialogue, well, that's something which I hope will come out of the participants' comments. Now, as a short introduction, I'll ask to set the slide on the screen, if possible. We have a slide with può mettere lo slide sullo schermo.
Sì, sì, arrivo.
Arriva. So in a minute you will have a slide with the latest estimate scenarios for the Spanish economy from the Bank of Spain. That was published last September. The GDP forecast for the current year is minus 10.5 to minus 12.6, with a recovery between 7.3 and 4.1% next year. The quarterly figures, which were published later, indicated a better than expected trend in the third quarter. Public debt will increase from 95% of GDP last year to 116.8 or 120 at the end of this year, and the unemployment rate is up from 14 to 17.1 or 18.6%. The government has slightly more optimistic figures to support its 2021 proposed budget, which is presently being discussed in Parliament and which will include financial support of various kinds from the European Union. As you may know, we have had a long period of provisional government and uncertain Parliament majority, which explains that the 2018 budget, the last one submitted by the Rajoy Partido Popular government, had to be extended for 2 more years. The new budget will probably be more expansionary, although the details are still being negotiated between the parties which support the coalition government, the left-wing coalition government. Paolo suggested I should say something about the impact of COVID on Spanish insurance, given my already old experience in this sector with Mafre. I don't have up-to-date figures for the whole insurance sector, but the indications are as follows. Negative premium growth in motor and commercial insurance, whereas private health insurance is growing and is typically anti-cyclical. Life savings products have a difficult time in the context of low interest rate, but that was already a fact before COVID. In the Mafre third quarter's published results, which is a significant part of the market, although it does not represent the whole market, of course, non-life combined ratio is improving around 95. Premium income is down around 11% in Spain and minus 20 in Latin America. Net profit remains stable at 450 million euros and solvency ratio at 184. The pandemic has created an intensive experience in reorganizing work and risk management of all sorts for the group as a whole, of course, in Spain and abroad. But the impact, I must say, is not at all catastrophic. Technically, results remain good. So let's start now with our 3 presentations. And my first set of questions goes to José Manuel González Páramo. We have just mentioned that Spain's public debt is increasing substantially, and this is possible thanks to essential support from ECB. Is this a concern in your view? How do you see Spanish banks in the context of the COVID-19 crisis? And what can you say about European solidarity? How is Spanish business doing relative to the Eurozone and in worldwide export markets? Up to you, José Manuel, you have 8 minutes.
Okay, Alfredo, thank you very much for this kind invitation and the introduction you have made. So I have a few minutes to touch upon 5 questions in one. So let me first, on public debt, you have mentioned the size of the increase, which is really extraordinary. In fact, the debt increase is expected to be way above of the deficit that we are expecting for this year. The deficit is expected at around 13%, between 12 and 13. The jump is 10 points, but the public debt is going to jump close to 30 points. The explanation, of course, is that the government is front-loading emissions given the attractive level of interest rates in the markets. And of course, this is due almost entirely to the actions of the ECB together with the coordination of policies across the board in this crisis, which is, I think, one of the bright spots of the response of the crisis, the degree of coordination. So now the risk premium is very low, is between 70 and 75 basis points. Who would have said that in the middle of such a crisis? Compare this with 2008, 2012. In 2012, the risk premium was above 700 basis points compared to Germany. Now is 1/10 of this amount. Well, this is the outcome of a necessary movement in order to finance many things: the temporary employment program, the minimum income, the unemployment benefits, new health expenditures, and also results from the plummeting of tax revenues. But okay, the coin has a not so nice side, because this level of public debt, which is unprecedented for Spain, makes the country more vulnerable when rates start to go up. Just take a look at what happened after the announcement of the new vaccine, Pfizer. The rates in the markets went up by between 10 and 15 basis points in one day. Well, this gives the measure of what could be going forward a reality if plans to rein in the public debt and start reducing the public debt are not undertaken as soon as possible. Not the implementation, but the design of these plans. Because also this public debt detracts from the amount of available funds for private business and increases the funding needs in the international markets, which in the case of Spain, to the difference of Italy, are really huge. No? Spain appeals to international markets in 75% of financial needs of the economy. In Italy is way below these figures. So you basically resort to Italian savers to finance Italian investment. On the Spanish banks, the good news is that the banks are much better capitalized than they were at the start of the crisis of 2008. This is very good news. Also, the stress tests taken or completed by Bank of Spain indicate that in the worst scenario thinkable as of today, the level of first quality capital would fall to slightly above 8%, which still is manageable. Liquidity is fine, leverage as well. And also banks on this occasion are cooperating closely with the government in order to make effective guarantees provided to private companies in order for these companies to access the financial system. Has to be said also that they are appealing, or they are getting the finance from the ECB through many avenues. The not so good news, one has to say, are first of all profitability, which was low before the COVID and is even lower now. So in the first semester of this year, it went into negative. It went into negative from plus 0.5 compared with total assets to minus 0.5. If you take away all the adjustments that have to do with badwill and so on, it's around 2% is below the 7%, which we estimate is the cost of capital in the markets. And this is bad news, because this implies that incentives for banks to lend are diminishing. And you can see that in the statistics of Bank of Spain. The net stock of credits is on the negative since July, and also new loans to companies are diminishing since the month of June. So that's not good news, and I think that reviving credits would require the ECB to stay put in the policies that they are now implementing, but also would require from the authorities in Spain to understand the role played by the ICO. ICO is the public bank in Spain to provide loans for SMEs and guarantees to lending. European solidarity I have to say, and we may discuss this, but I cannot be more positive on what we have seen in Europe. I cannot be more positive. I would have never expected the kind of response that Europe has given to the crisis from the very beginning, from March. We had the supervisors relaxing regulations on banks for the banks to continue lending. We had the ECB announcing new programs, lending more, relaxing supervision on the banks. And we had, of course, the Commission taking the lead, putting in place the program in order to complement the temporary national employment programs, announcing that they would push forward with a big program. They did not specify that in March, but in May they came with the new generation European Union, which is a premiere. To me, is really a breakthrough, is a big step in the creation of a true and genuine monetary union. And the ECB has announced that there is more to come. They will announce more measures in December. So I think the response, if you put all these things together, is really, really big, important, and has to be praised. And I hope that it will continue going forward. On Spanish business, we have many similarities with Italy. So there is nothing new that I can tell you, because 99.8% of our companies are SMEs. Of those 99.8%, the great majority, 92%, are very small SMEs with less than 9 employees per SME. So the situation usually is very weak against shocks like the one we face, particularly in sectors like transport, retail, tourism, leisure, and the arts. And this means that the financial vulnerability now is a very serious problem. Also, Bank of Spain is publishing data and statistics on this. I just can tell you that in 6 months, from February to September, 77,000 companies have disappeared. Most of them SMEs. Is 6% of the total number of companies in the country in just 6 months. So this is a death ratio which has no precedent. Almost 40% of the companies in the country have now negative return on equity, meaning negative results. So we have to watch it and continue this problem. And finally, on the external sector. On the external sector, what I can tell you is exports have plummeted in the second quarter. They recovered nicely in the fourth quarter, but all in all, the external demand this year will contribute on negative numbers to total demand. It is no surprise, because you see arrivals to the country from tourists fell 97%, spending fell 98%. So these figures are huge in the second quarter. In the third quarter, these figures went down to 75% of decrease in the case of tourists and 80% in spending. So expectations are good, but this sector is really suffering like hell. So the announcement of the vaccine, not by surprise, was greeted by large increases in the stock market and large increases in particular in banks, in tourist companies, in transport companies. Let's hope that we are now exiting at least the health problems, because only after that the pandemics will be, we will leave it behind and have the economy back on track.
Thank you, José Manuel. Very precise and good timing. Now let's turn to Alfredo Pastor with a second set of questions, which widen a little bit the focus. Although José Manuel already mentioned that, but Spanish unemployment remains one of the highest in Europe. How are the immediate needs being covered? José Manuel mentioned some of the banking arrangements, but the question include, of course, furlough subsidies, guaranteed loans, etc. How is public-private cooperation working? What can be done in the medium term, and that's more important probably, to create highly productive employment? And how can the Next Generation EU program, which is this great opportunity already mentioned by José Manuel, how can it be used to promote sustainable and technological up-to-date industrial projects, which is what it tries to do? Are we prepared to do so? That's our set of questions to Alfredo, please. Can you hear us? I'm afraid. Is he?
Yeah, we're trying to solve the technical troubles. Apparently, Mr. Pastor has problems with the audio. We're trying to solve them. In case if he does not hear us now, maybe we can switch right now to Mrs. Herrero and wait for Mr. Pastor to join us in a minute.
Okay, but you are in touch with him, aren't you?
We're trying via phone.
And he's on mute.
Is he? Ah. Okay, so we'll come back then to those questions, and then I'll ask Professor Herrero. There is, of course, behind all that, or as a consequence, a growing number of marginalization in low-income Spanish population, which is extremely worrying, especially if one thinks about youth unemployment. And this is not a new problem, it's a problem which is aggravated now, but it was there before. What are the main imbalances between education and employment? What can be done to promote vocational training, which is now very much on the agenda? What are the effects of online education on equality of opportunities? And how do you see the prospects for better financial education and financial inclusion? Please, Carmen. You should take off your mute.
Oh yeah, sure. Now it's okay. Okay. Yeah, good. Okay, so then the labor market situation of the youth in Spain is particularly bad and deteriorated even more during the pandemic. The problem is not only the unemployment level, but also the working conditions, instability, lack of protection, low salaries, etc. If we compare data from the third quarter 2020 and 2019, workers below 30 lost about 22% of their jobs, which is a total of 1,600,000, while the loss was around 8% for the general population. The largest amount of workers temporarily suspended with ERTE concentrated mostly on permanent jobs, and thus the coverage of the youth, mostly with temporary jobs, was significantly worse than that of older workers. Also, the discouraged workers, those that renounced to keep looking for a job, increased about 70% for the young generation, while it was around 45% for the general population. All in all, this puts in perspective the extreme deterioration of the labor situation of the young population in Spain. This is particularly worrisome, as you mentioned, as the long-run effects of entering the job market under a recession or with bad initial conditions are well known. First, there is a significant reduction in earnings along the life cycle. They have bad prospects for the graduates, damaging permanently their career outcomes. They have terrible effects on marriage decisions and on fertility, and they have also effects on health and mortality in middle age. And what is even worse is that in Spain, the young generation has been suffering from bad labor conditions for very long, and the current crisis only is exacerbating the consequences on this generation. And I think that we owe them some sort of hope. If we talk about education, indeed, people with better education have better chances in the labor market. But currently, this effect is significantly lower in Spain for the young generation as it used to be. The education system in Spain is plenty of problems. not being the less important the instability provoked by many different education laws along the last years. Now we are facing a new one, apparently. Some of our peculiarities and problems are the following. On the one hand, the Spanish education pyramid is basically an hourglass. Too many people with university studies, less people with secondary or vocational studies, and this has an effect of mismatch in the labor market, frustration and deterioration of higher education. Also, we have the highest school dropout rate in Europe, over 70%, even though we were able to reduce it significantly in the last years. As a consequence, the number of needs in Spain is one of the highest in Europe, around 24%. We have poor public financial investment in education at the primary and secondary levels. It is partly compensated by private investment, but this also produces a significant segregation in the education system, reinforcing inequality. There is a serious imbalance between university studies and the labor market. Only health-related and STEM degrees have a good employability. In this sense, we have a worrying overrepresentation of women in those degrees with the lowest employability, and this means that we may enlarge the divide between men and women in the future. We have poor financial education in the schools. In the last 3 waves, the OECD incorporated finance competence in the PISA test as a way of signaling its importance among the basic training. Spain and also Italy are significantly below the mean in those tests. We have also substantial problems in vocational training. They are structural, of low prestige, and of low implication of the firms. We have problems with dual formation and with public-private collaboration. This is affecting the prospects of those youngsters that do not follow university studies, as well as the possibilities of the firms to get better employees. On the other hand, something that we have to take into account is that working abilities are now changing, and the education system should prepare the young generation to adjust to these new ways: digitalization, teleworking, new commerce, robotics, etc. We are facing now a technical and digital revolution here, with an impact on the labor market which is going to be similar to that of the Industrial Revolution. Because of that, the adaptation of the countries to deal with the new requirements of the labor market are essential. Countries as Spain and also Italy may face the problem of not being technologically and financially innovative enough, and at the same time trying to preserve the welfare state. Investment in research, development, and innovation are essential to properly use the European funds that are coming. Going back to the education system, and in this respect, we should be conscious of the problems of equality of opportunities provoked by the pandemic over the most sensible population. During the pandemic, the population under poverty in Spain grew some 10 points, from 14% to 24%, according to Eurostat. This affects especially families with children and low income. For those children and youngsters in poor families, the digital divide provoked a lack of opportunities, in particular during the lockout. They were suffering from lack of family support, as for them, the school role becomes much more important. Also from lack of access, what we coin as digital poverty. Devices are easy to provide, access is more complicated. Finally, it is important to stress the situation of the schools in the poor districts that suffer from lack of digital resources and of teachers' training much more than in rich neighborhoods. All this adding up, what we may ask, what can we do? And there are so many things that it is difficult to say something, but still I will point 6 essential questions. On the one hand, the digitalization at all levels becomes essential. Our administration is far from being efficient in this respect, and we need a significant improvement here. Otherwise, many efforts will be lost, and maybe we can miss an opportunity of using properly the European funds. We need universal access to the internet, both at the individual and firm levels. What about a digital bonus for the less favored families? Now access to the internet is as important as access to electricity. Third, it is also essential to take seriously the importance of incorporating talent in our system, as well as increase the investment in research and development. Our country is well below the average 2% of the national product and has been so for too long so far. Fourth, we have to take seriously a reform in vocational training with real public-private collaboration, enhancing also financial education. So far, there was some improvement, but not enough. Models implemented in other countries may help. Fifth, we have to change the production sector, as José Manuel mentioned, reinforcing innovation, sustainability, and respect for the environment. Diversification is essential. We cannot rely so much only on the service sector, and in particular on the tourist sector. For sure, they will remain important, but the consequences of an excessive dependence have been clear. We suffer more than any other country in Europe. And finally, we have to look seriously at the university. Here, we need a significant adaptation to the new society that is coming at a tremendous speed, as well as to become competitive enough in research and innovation. Public-private cooperation and firms' involvement in the university are also essential. And on top of that, of course, we cannot forget to reinforce the health system that is at the basis of any sort of recovery. Unfortunately, it seems to be quite likely that we have this sort of shocks more frequently in the future, and we should be prepared for deal with them better than we dealt in this occasion. Thank you.
Your microphone, Mr. Sugranyes, yes.
Sorry, thank you, Carmen. And well, that's a difficult panorama, although there are also positive elements, which I don't know if we have now Alfredo Pastor online or not. Do you know?
Apparently, he just wrote us a message saying that it didn't work on the phone. He's trying to connect again. We're trying to give him again the number to connect. So. Okay.
Well, I think in the meantime, we can quickly turn again to José Manuel to complement on whatever he likes. But I would say, and probably Alfredo would say, that all these negative factors, which rightly were described by Carmen Herrero, are extremely there and difficult and worrying. But at the same time, we have extremely dynamic parts of service and industry in quite a number of areas. There is more innovation happening than we know, and I mean it's always the question of the half empty or half full. But the question is whether we have the right organization to make use of let's say, the EU New Generation program. Let's perhaps focus on that. José Manuel, what would you say?
Yeah, well, let me first comment on one of the many interesting points made by Carmen, but I think is a pretty important one going forward, because there is a lot of discussion between economists on whether this is a recovery in V or in W, or is an L or is a U. You see, maybe the economy is recovering in a W. I think this is what we see now, that there are many we are recovering in a K. And this means some go up, but some go down. And means quality good and a society is too unequal, it doesn't employ resources where political and social instability could impinge upon the welfare of everyone. The young vis-a-vis the established workers, and she mentioned the conditions under which the young are working. Now the youth unemployment rate is coming back quickly to the levels we saw in the 2008 crisis. And it's pretty unfair that the young people, now people with 30 years, have been gone through two heavy crises with all the impact that she has mentioned in terms of their careers, their wages, their decisions in life, like marriage or having kids, or there is another divide. The digital now are in the bottom. Because they manage well in the world. So there are many divides, and I think the authorities should endeavor to tackle this in the best way possible, because it's not just an economic issue, it's a moral issue. I think we owe them this. On the questions you make, of course, the glass is half full to some extent, because we are learning the hard way that diversification is a good thing in finance, but also in life. So maybe we have been focusing too much in our economy in sectors that use personal interaction intensively, and the future will be slightly less. I think we will come back to some kind of normalcy which is familiar to us. I don't think the new world is around the corner yet, but indeed we have learned to live with digital, those that have access to that, and this means new opportunities appear. You have seen, for instance, all kinds of services flourishing thanks to the pandemics, people bringing you at home things at the expense of small retail. So this is a big change coming. And what I'm worried is about the transition from now to the new steady state, because in the middle, if you catch people with low skills and low capacity to adapt, and when active labor policies are not the optimal ones, let me use a nice word to describe the active labor policies in Spain, then you cannot help them to do this transition. And you generate pockets of low-skilled, low-income families across the country. And this, of course, is, I think, bothering not so well for the future. The new generation EU program has many, many positive things in it. I think there is not a negative. It will help us to focus very much on investments for the future, in sustainability, in digital, in infrastructures. And if the government speeds up and does things well, and this is a big question mark, we will start to see new investments in these sectors which are highly productive and would put the economy in a new path. So it depends very much on how this is managed at the national level. There are question marks that have to do with the capacity to execute this big amount of money. In the case of Spain, it will be 140 billion euro to be decided in just 3 years, in spite of the fact that the money will come later until 2006, 2007. And it's a very short time period if you don't have prepared the projects to use it. We have to invest in 5G, we have to invest in reforming the housing stock in the country to be more green, more climate efficient. We have to invest in digital infrastructures and many other things. And this will provide a lot of employment and will go hand in hand with the future trends. So in that sense, I'm very positive. But look, in the past, the government has been able to execute only 30% of the funds approved by the European Commission. 30%. From 100, the government was able to execute 30. Now the money is coming in a big mass, but will we be able to execute it in the best way possible? This is a big question mark, and I hope that the government is fully focused on relaxing the rules that impede this execution, serving, of course, the accountability and the transparency, because you cannot give rise to corruption and bad decisions in this context. So, and there is another dimension. Let me just mention it. New Generation EU will be financed by common funds, meaning issuing common bonds in the area. And this is a premiere. This is the first time that the European Union finance jointly in the markets expenses to be made, also attending to the need and the intensity of the shock. To me, and then it will be repaid with taxes and funds coming from the budget of the European Union. This is, I think, the pilot of the European Treasury and the fiscal leg that we are missing in the monetary union. So I hope, and this is a big hope, that the New Generation EU will consolidate itself as a permanent fund, not just for the crisis, in the same way that the ESM, the European Stability Mechanism that was created just for the Greek case and the Portuguese case, remains with us, and is a very good thing to have it. It issues bonds in the markets and is ready to be employed when there is a need. So the New Generation EU, to me, is, as I said, a pilot, is a precedent, is a pre-Hamiltonian moment of the European Union, and that's very good news for those of us, of course, that believe in the future of the euro. Thank you, José Manuel. And it's also a great challenge for us to be able to, let's say, involve private initiative in these in all these projects and to make it work, no, together with the public sector. That's a great challenge, and it, well, maybe, if, let's hope. Okay, so I think we should open the question and answer session.
Maybe Mr. Pastor is on the telephone line. Mr. Pastor, do you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you quite well. Thank you.
Yes, finally.
I'm very, very sorry to have been able to connect so late.
Okay, Alfredo. Well, the questions we've been discussing around them, but you can perhaps, if you have heard what José Manuel just explained, maybe you could comment and complement, especially regarding the change, the transformation, the necessary transformations in Spanish industrial and service activities.
Okay.
To create good jobs. I mean,
yeah. Well, from the beginning, there was a distinction in the Next Generation EU Fund between reconstruction and transformation. And I've been working mostly on the question of transformation. That is, how can we generate enough projects which will change our industrial structure to some extent. My impression is that there is a reasonable roadmap. That is, people are becoming aware of exactly what is needed to present good projects, who has to present those projects, and so on. First of all, there are a few good projects that I've heard in the industrial sector. The things that look so far like weak links are, first of all, that the selection mechanism is not completely clear so far. And the second is that there are many projects which can be generated by small enterprises. And there is nothing especially prepared for those small and medium enterprises. What should they do? Should they join with bigger projects? Can we have a sort of a bicycle path, a special bicycle path for them? I don't know. But these are the main concerns for the transformation. For the reconstruction, I think this is of course an important part, because if the reconstruction is not successful, the transformation will not take place. And for that, we have been relying so far on two kinds of measures. aid to individuals and essentially furlough schemes for firms. The aid have had enormous implementation difficulties due to the administration. There are quite a few people who have not received the aids that they were supposed to receive. As for the furlough schemes, of course, they are transitory. They are supposed to be for an emergency, but this is not going to be an emergency. This is going to last a long time. And it is going to probably raise our level of unemployment very high. Especially, it will impinge on people who have not very high skills and who have a certain age. And for that kind of thing, the idea has been floated of a guaranteed job program, or the sort that Roosevelt put together in 1943. I don't think that the idea has had much success so far, but I think this is a necessary scheme, because otherwise we are going to have an enormous stock of unemployed and difficult unemployable people. I think that this is what I can say to complete what José Manuel González Páramo has just said.
Thank you, Alfredo. And you mentioned, if I may say, you mentioned in an article, I said you publish every fortnight this idea of a guaranteed employment scheme following an American example of the 30s, which is interesting. No, that's interesting, and then it's real. It's not something purely.
It's been done. It's been done successfully a long time ago, and there are some papers already who are talking of a European initiative in that direction. My impression is that it's too early for the European Union to take such an initiative, because the situation vary very much from country to country. But local initiatives can be taken. And there are some initiatives in France, for instance. They have created at the village level zero unemployment zones, which they are just employing people and making them feel useful, because this is not just a question of economic health. It's to a large extent a question of moral health. And that is very necessary. And I don't think that we can do much else than that. We cannot trust the private sector to absorb all the people who are going to be left out with this transformation.
No, because the transformation projects must be highly competitive and fine-tuned.
They are not going to be labor intensive.
No.
And the labor they will be employing will not be the kind of labor that will be let out from the hospitality industry or from the construction industry. Yeah. That is the thing.
Well, thank you very much, Alfredo. Now I turn to Dr. Safaris because we have little time left. How do you want to proceed? Do you have questions from the floor?
Well, there were some questions that I'm just going to bundle together because of time reasons, and maybe, Mr. Sugranyes, if you agree, actually our Secretary General could reply to all of these questions, being at the forefront of the thoughts of all our speakers, and so I can give them to Paolo directly. The main question is how do we see the monetary policy of the ECB proceed in the future? Is there going to be a continued help from the ECB? Will the monetary policy continue in the years? And what is your view of the eminent speakers and of our conclusions? And the second one is, somebody's asking whether, like John Maynard Keynes said, in the long run, we're all going to be dead. So the question is the next generation EU going to come to the real economy in time for the economic recovery to take place?
Okay.
Yeah,
so Paolo,
I don't know.
Paolo,
yeah. Paolo, maybe, and if somebody of the speakers want us to comment, we always have some minutes more time.
No, but I think if you have, I mean, those questions were addressed to you. If you have a quick response to that, then I will.
Yes. Okay, then a very quick round to the speakers, and then Paolo for final comments.
José Manuel, please.
Yeah, on the second question, I think I was clear that it's a big question mark whether we will be able to execute that are provided by the European Union, and this depends very much on our capacities to put good projects in place. I think Alfredo has more information than me on that respect. To me, it's very important, in any case, that this money that comes from the Union is not used to delay even more the necessity to implement structural reforms in many areas and sectors, and all the others, because this would encourage nicely the new project of the Union and increase output growth in the future. As regards the first question, from what the ECB has done, since the beginning of this year, from what Christine Lagarde said the day before yesterday in Frankfurt, because they have had a new central banking congress in Frankfurt, I have no doubt the ECB will reach the gap between the situation in which we are now and the solidification of the recovery. And it means funds as necessary on the condition to credits and buy more bonds. I would expect that in December make a big announcement to extend the asset purchase until the end of next year, 2021. The markets are not expecting until late 23 or even 24. This means a long period with easy financial conditions. So finance will not stand in the way, I think, of the recovery. We don't have to have, that's my understanding, any doubt that the ECB will help. And going forward, we will see what is the moment that the ECB will decide to roll back all these measures, but I don't see this happening in 2-3 years.
Thank you, José Manuel. Would Carmen add anything? Would you like to add anything?
Actually, I agree mostly with what Alfredo said about this idea of covering jobs properly during the meantime. As for the prospects for the fund, I would say that I am surprised that many of them have many interesting ideas in the technological aspect. No? So if they have the right skills, they will survive in the medium run. But the problem is that we have many youngsters without the right skills. And that's a problem that we have to face at some point. The other thing that worries me a lot is whether we will be able to really deal properly with the funds coming from the Union. I mean, we have many tools in the show, starting from the government side. No? The political situation is not that easy. If we are unable to really go through approving the budget smoothly, I wonder whether we will be able to go further in the recovery in a smooth way. So this is something that worries me a lot.
Thank you, Carmen. Alfredo, do you want to add?
Well, I agree with what Carmen just said. My impression is that we will have a budget. That the road is not smooth, but we will be able to cross that river, because the alternative is not conceivable. And as far as the projects are concerned, the problem is that the European Union would like to have projects presented essentially by firms, so that there is a certain amount of entrepreneurial organization behind these projects, that they are not just inventions, that they are projects which are able to be implemented. And this is what our firms have to realize, and it's taking some time. But I think we'll be able to do something as far as that is concerned.
Thank you. And I think I couldn't agree more with what José Manuel said at the beginning. The enormously positive example of solidarity within the European Union, of which we are part, and we are part of it. And I think that is really the main positive thing, which I hope can move companies, initiatives, all sorts, because it will be not just one government office which will solve this. I mean, it needs a full effort of a great number of people to. And another very positive thing in Spain presently is that finally we are looking differently at the question of vocational training, and it was mentioned by Carmen and by others, and that is really something which we urgently need. So thank you, Paolo. I give you back the floor.
Thank you, Domingo. Thank you. There ain't much time for me to comment because I think actually we are extending a little bit the time now. But I need really to thank all of you, to thank in particular Domingo Sugranyes. I didn't spend many words in introducing him because I assume that you all know him, but I think from the way he managed this excellent discussion, I think you see how expert he is in many fields, particularly in the field of insurance, where I had the pleasure of cooperating with him, the important position he held at Mafre, and also as chair of the Fondazione Centesimus Annus. I think he did an excellent job there. And I am also grateful to the prominent speakers and the people attending. I mean, we had a lot of Spanish friends attending. I think it's encouraging. If you see the list of participants, the number and the quality of the participants, I think shows that I think we reached the objective that we wanted with this meeting, not to exhaust certainly the problematic, it's so vast, but open the way to more meetings, more initiatives, in order to have closer relations and more intense dialogue between the financial communities, the Spanish and the Italian financial communities, and definitely we are going to invest in this relationship, not only because of all the common interests and objectives that we have in terms of bilateral relations in many sectors, including the sectors of banking and finance, but also because we share common interest in our priority areas in Europe, in affecting and European policies in Latin America and in the Euro-Mediterranean. You see, I must, if we look at European policies, I must confess, I've never come to terms with the fact that we have not been able, Spain and Italy, to build a kind of a strategic southern axis within the Union, capable of shifting the center gravity of Union towards the south. I think we probably, in line with our Latin character, we tend more to compete than to cooperate. And I think there is certainly scope now to intensify our joint efforts to play a more important, a more prominent role in the European Union, particularly, let me stress, the Euro-Mediterranean area. This year is the 25th anniversary of the Barcelona process. I mean, you might say we don't have much to celebrate on that. To some extent it's true, because I think the situation in the Mediterranean now is dramatic, with all the pressures coming from migration, from terrorism, in spite of all the opportunities we have there in terms of more cooperation. So I think we need really to work harder on that with our northern colleagues, so that they also understand the importance of including the Mediterranean, the Euro-Mediterranean in our European priorities. You have also seen from the discussion that not only we share the dramatic situation, we were affected probably more than other by the pandemic, and the transition for us is more difficult because of our industrial structures, SMEs, because of the sectors of specializations of our economy that require more close contact but also in terms of opportunities. I think, in terms of the transition, we have a lifestyle, we have a quality of life that enables us to be at the forefront of the new normals. And so I think, and frankly, what we are seeing now, smaller and medium enterprises in Italy, the rebouncing in global value chains with SMEs has been extraordinary. Their resilience, their flexibility has been extraordinary. I mean, in the third term, there was a rebound of plus 16% of Italian GDP. And I think that's very important. So to conclude, I think I want to thank you all very much. I think we need to keep in contact. We are very committed to this bilateral dialogue, and definitely we would like to work together with you also on Euro-Mediterranean and the European Union initiatives. So thank you very much to all of you. Arrivederci, hasta luego, and hope that some other time we can see each other in person, enjoying life as Spaniards and Italians know how to do that better than others, probably. Thank you to you all.
Arrivederci.
Thank you, Paolo.
Grazie mille.
Hasta luego.
Gracias.
Bye.
Hasta pronto.
Sí, adiós. Gracias.
Hasta pronto.
Adiós.
Hasta la próxima.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Grazie.